All right. Sorry about the slight delay. We'll start the City Council work session for Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. It's a little after 5:05, and we'll just jump right in. We're going to hear from Core Spaces on a presentation for Uptown Development. So, Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak again before you. I brought another big crew like I did last time. This time I think Andy, my colleague at Core Spaces, is going to help present the Hub Clemson at Abernathy Park. Working title, but it is the Hub brand is the name of our the main brand of the developer around the country, which is a best-in-class product. I'm not going to speak too much about who we are, just because I did that last time and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But just a quick highlight of who we are. One of the larger student housing groups in the developers in the country. We're based out of Chicago. We really focus on developing the best-in-class assets at some of the best institutions in the country. And so what that means is, universities like Clemson are our primary focus. This is where we want to be. We actually are already here with a project across Lake Hartwell called the Pier, which we bought early last year and broke ground shortly thereafter on an expansion of it, making a big investment into the community. One of my favorite stats to highlight kind of who we are and what we're about is there's 8 cities where we've done multiple projects in. And so about half of those we've done 3 or more, with a few approaching the half-dozen mark. So I think it speaks volumes to who we are as developers. We really like to get into the community, and build special projects that everyone can be proud of. And so with that, I wanted to share a little bit of a quick update on the Pier. It might not have been something many have been aware of, but we are delivering 900 beds there over the course of the next 12 months. About a quarter of those are actually already built, and a 12,000 square foot amenity building in the lower right-hand corner. That was taken as about a week, 2 weeks ago. So live action shot. All those homes on the left are brand new, and you can see the lake in the foreground. So great example of some of our workmanship, product, our design, our attention to detail. That's probably our number one thing that we're proud of. We like to say that no 2 of our projects are the same, and we really take a lot of pride in our design. That's kind of how, that is what I would say allowed us to grow to be the group that we are today, and it's something that we are mindful of to not try to outgrow. And so we're really excited to talk about a lot of things, not least of which the design of the park and the pedestrian experience that we're trying to create at the Abernathy Park. I'll kick it to Andy, I think, for this next intro to.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. And thank you all for making special time for us today. I might call on Joe if you guys ask me a tough question, and then Chirag Patel is our architect. He's also in the crowd, so I may bring him up if you have a technical question. We were here in May talking about this project, and since then we've made some progress on the assemblage of land that we actually control in this area. And as we've been making progress on that, we've been working on a scheme and a proposal with the goal of accomplishing as much as we can within the Uptown Next framework. And so we thought it might make sense to kind of go through that as a recap to just kind of go over what we saw in the framework and what we were going for as we developed this. And so this is the image from the framework, and it shows a few things. It shows a large expansion of the park. It shows outdoor dining within the park, plaza space up against the park. It shows student housing to the west of College, with non-student housing to the east of College. And all of those things were kind of guiding principles that we were trying to incorporate into our proposal. We don't control all this land, but we control a lot of it at this point. And so this was kind of a guiding theme for us. This is an exhibit that kind of shows you what we control. The parcels in purple, we have kind of the option to control via fee simple ownership. And the parcels in orange, we're working on easements over because they actually can help us expand the park space and actually connect to the rest of the superblock. Parcels in green we do not control, but we do think that our project can help activate those parcels and kind of help them be redeveloped by connecting them to this new park space that we're going to propose. We have most of our frontage along Kiwi Trail, facing Lake Hartwell, and there's U.S. Army Corps property kind of flanking either side of the site, and then we have a small amount of frontage along Wall Street, which is kind of a small street that does the 90-degree turn near the corner. We are going to propose a project that is going to be roughly 1,300 beds out of the 1,800 that Uptown Next has kind of allotted for this total area. There's 8,500 square feet of retail, and we're expanding the green space and the usable space of the park by roughly triple in our proposal.
Which is actually, if you note in the lower left corner of the slide, is more than the city framework document we're exceeding the goal of the city framework document, which I think was, if we prioritized our goals when we set out to design something, I would say first and foremost was expansion of a first-rate park. Second goal would be connectivity throughout the rest of the Uptown District. And then third would be, programming, flexibility, and making sure that ensuring the vibrancy of this district through good retail, which we'll get to later. I don't want to jump too far ahead.
So this is the last diagram that I'll show you before I start showing you real stuff. And as we were thinking about how to make this park bigger and connect it better to the lake, we started to like the idea of what's called a woonerf, which is a Dutch concept of a living street. So it's a shared street.
This is why he's taking control of the reins, because I can't pronounce that word, to be clear.
And so a woonerf basically controls traffic speed through paving techniques, scale of the street, roundabouts. And so we thought, what if we did that with Kiwi Trail, and in that way connected our side of Kiwi Trail with the park side of Kiwi Trail to make it bigger? And how could that basically increase the park acreage and enhance the experience with, by adding some of our own kind of program to the park that would be on our own property. And so what you're about to see shows, what we would do on our property, and shows some suggestions of what could be done on the public property. That's going to be a coordination with the Army Corps and a lot of kind of other public entities. We understand that, but we wanted to show the potential of how this could actually connect into our development. So what you're seeing here is kind of an aerial view and plan view of what we would propose. And it's there's basically four main components. Number one is just the building itself. It's the residential building. And it wraps around a parking structure, which we can get to later, but the larger part of it makes a C shape that opens up to the park and provides publicly accessible space on our private property within that C shape. And that creates kind of a boundary in a large urban room of park space that becomes now more of a focal point than it is currently. Number two is the park itself. That's basically shown as this cascading terrace that we can get into a little bit later. We have some renderings of it. And you can see this woonerf in the middle, separating 1 and 2. That's the lightly colored paving. So Kiwi Trail has 2 roundabouts at the north and the south. In between, there's a woonerf, so a car could actually drive from one roundabout to the other. And that would also allow access for fire access vehicles and other things. But we're thinking that would slow traffic enough to make the entire park space feel like one large space. You can see we've planned for a few different parking areas, both surface parking at a lot to the south at each roundabout, and then also structured parking to the north, off of the roundabout to the north in the building itself. Number 3 is townhomes. So this would be a building that would be mostly commercial space and retail along the park, but there are select areas where actual residential units hit the ground. And so number 3 shows kind of these private courtyard terraces that would serve as the entrance to the townhome units. And then number 4 would be a precast parking deck, which would then have an amenity area programmed on top of it that would be tall enough to actually look over the building and actually have views of the lake from this amenity terrace.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So I see the number 4, and I think that's the parking. So is the blue beneath that the parking? I'm trying to figure out between the 4 and then the blue beneath that.
Right, so the entire square that is lined with green is the parking. So it's a 3-bay parking deck, so it's 180 feet wide. That blue square is just a pool. So that's
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure.
Right.
That's
on top of it.
That's what I wasn't sure of. Okay.
And that hasn't been particularly programmed yet, but we just wanted to paint the picture.
I'm good. Thank you.
We'll keep going, so we'll probably get into it a little bit.
Right. So just a kind of high-level overview of the general density that we're talking about. We're talking about something between 400 and 450 units. That's 1,100-ish bedrooms, and sometimes there's more than one bed in a bedroom. So it's kind of up to 1,300 beds at this point.
But does the 1,300 include 3?
Yes. Yes, it does.
So the townhomes the townhomes are not necessarily going to be rented by the bed, but probably more by the unit, or is that the plan on that?
I would say it's very early in the process right now. I think that the vast majority of this, we were thinking most of these units will be rented by the bed. Now, there will definitely be some, single occupancy units, and so therefore, if you rent by the bed.
I just was interested that you called them townhomes.
Exactly.
Right, that was kind of what threw me off on that. Okay.
Sorry, I'm backing up here.
I'm glad you
Right,
asked that.
so they're townhomes just because you can enter directly from the outside through your front door without going through a lobby. And so they're lined up with that kind of like a front yard. So, and that's what makes them, we've done it both ways. We've rented them by the unit and by the bed. It's much easier to rent them by the bed because that's our general pricing is based on that model. But yeah, so that's what the townhome component is.
Can I ask a question? So then what would be the non-student units?
So I think, we're by law not allowed to ever turn anyone
No,
away.
I get that, but I'm just saying if.
Marketing-wise.
Marketing-wise.
Marketing-wise, yes. So I think it's still really early in our process for instance, we're still layering in, there's some steep grade change, and we're really figuring out how these units are going to live, and we understood that was a goal, I think, workforce housing, right? So market rate, but maybe even targeted to, more lower price points. I think how we accomplish that is something we're still trying to understand, and there's a lot of moving pieces. And so, for instance, the grade change could very well really challenge some of those units to get really good access to the parking without going through the student housing component of it. So I'm not trying to give you a non-answer as much as it is somewhat early, and we do understand that as a goal of the council, and we're going to continue to explore it.
Well, the reason I'm asking that question is because if that's what you have in the beginning of the presentation, I guess that's what I'd be looking for, some of that throughout the presentation. Because when you started, you mentioned student housing units and non-student at the beginning of the presentation. So that's why so by being early,
At the
I'm
beginning,
just trying to figure out.
the point there was that
So,
the
yeah.
Uptown Next plan contemplated student housing within
So
this
this is
superblock.
the plan, this is not
The
your plan,
towers.
that's our plan.
That's right.
Okay,
Right.
just making sure I understand.
Right, and then all the non-student housing was on the other side of the street. That's what we noticed.
Yeah, I think
in the current plan.
The purpose of this slide is just really to show all the ways that we're,
Helping us with our plan.
Exactly.
and I think we're really executing on what the spirit of the Uptown plan was.
Okay.
Asterisk. Will you go back?
Sure.
There is going to be, it's not marketed as student housing, but there will be students living on both sides of the street everywhere in this town. That's going to happen. I would love if there was a way, and I know we're never going to say students can't live somewhere. That would defeat the purpose of living in a college town. But those townhomes or maybe not renting by the bedroom and renting by the townhome or renting by the flat. There is a demand in this city for housing that is rental for people that are not students, young families, professors who are coming in for 2 or 3 years, people who don't want to buy a home and don't want to be responsible for maintenance. Outside of the workplace housing conversation would be very beneficial, and then obviously workplace housing would be beneficial as well. But that, I think, would be a huge get if you guys could figure out a way to factor that in.
And that's the point of us being here, is to try to get your feedback so we can incorporate that.
I do believe, to her point, particularly on those townhomes, that I don't know what you rent by the bid, but let's just assume you had a $4,000 deal. I'm not so certain those townhomes couldn't command nearly that much on a rental basis anyway. Even if it was for a family, you were attracting that kind of person to that place, because you got a lot going on down there. You got the waterfront, particularly if we finish it up like you're talking about right there. I don't know that you would really probably put yourself behind the 8 ball from a rent perspective on those particular units.
It would be a unit size management situation, because there
That's
are a
what I'm
few
saying. I
things
think
that would require a $4,000.
I think you could command those rents.
Right.
And I think what we would want to do is make sure it's set up for success, right? If this,
Right.
if
We
this-
both want you. We want you to feel successful to go forward with it.
Oh, but if the spirit of it is to really try to attract non-students, make it desirable for them, I think we'd want to design it in a way that you're not intermingling the different uses, because I know personally, I would not want to live in a student housing. I would want a certain.
I'll argue that.
You're not going to be able to say no students. But I mean, if you set it up that way, that doesn't mean that 4 students aren't going to come rent it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
We
And
recognize that.
I will argue that though, because as somebody who rented for 10 years and lived among students, it was awesome. So you're gonna have people in this town who don't hate that idea, who are very open to that idea.
And you see the convenience.
And the convenience, that location, I mean, amazing.
So it's a great point, actually, and I think I did say what I said too quickly, because the pier actually does have that as well.
Right.
And I think that if you know the pier well, those tiny homes
Yep.
are a great
Exactly.
housing product.
Now put that right here and think about that location. You're gonna have people like me who I would love to be able to walk to everything. That's where you're gonna have a lot of success if you can market a unit to be rented versus a bedroom. A mix of both would be great. And I really don't think you're gonna be missing out. You're not gonna need to separate the,
But a townhouse is perfect for that.
Yeah.
I got to ask a question though, because I know I'm jumping around here. The P up at the top, what is that?
parking
That indicates parking,
So
publicly
that's a
available
parking deck.
parking.
That's a parking deck there as well.
without a pool on top of it.
I know.
Well, I was just gonna say, the blue indicates specifically areas that the public can come into park.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Very specific. Whereas the number 4 is only for private.
Residents.
Oh, they got it.
And so I think that's an important distinction.
Oh,
as,
yeah.
Very important.
as we're going to get into too, we've really tried thinking about the connectivity here.
So
as our
that
number
was
two goal.
another question I had, thinking about 4 below the pool, parking deck, residents only. One of the concerns I had was seeing that's coming off of Wall Street and the road between Duncan and Skins. That will control traffic flow at that point, because at some point, it'll be residents only. Technically, that would be going to that deck. And then visitors would be going down Kiwi Trail to the roundabout into the public parking. Okay.
Do you really? I mean, do you really have to leave that road open between those two roundabouts?
That's, yeah.
That's an interesting question.
Close it.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my fear is because it's a noted cut through anyway.
Right.
And it's used, we can do somebody can do a traffic count, but it's a noted cut through now. And I'm just afraid that, I know the end result we're looking for, and I'm just afraid that if you keep that road open in any form or fashion, you're gonna still have that cut through traffic. When I
It's
think
not gonna be safe. It's
That
not
is-
gonna be safe for the park and for people
Right.
walking around.
That is where we started. We didn't want to overstep our bounds, and I have to talk to Chirag about fire access too. That's another
Well,
big
that's-
piece of the puzzle, because I don't want to end up with
And
something
that might be one of those things like you see in cities with, what are they, the poles that come up that you can remove?
Bollards, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Thank you.
Right. But again, also, I'm thinking of one particular building in town is where the fire lane isn't necessarily paved, but it is still considered a fire lane. I
Yeah.
mean, is that,
We can account, I think Andy hit it on the head. We didn't want to be presumptuous and say, we think you should shut down this road, whereas we all but are saying that by saying,
Yeah.
this is a Woonor.
yeah, right, I don't think you'll get any pushback here, but the point of it is that would green, that would just expand that whole green space there that much more.
Right.
So I think that's a great point. I think you'll appreciate some of the things in the next few slides.
Sorry, we know we got ahead of
There's a lot
ourselves.
more to talk about here.
I'm excited. I think it was a great point, though.
Sorry to interrupt.
And I asked, by the way, if we could do a fire lane in all grass, and he yelled at me. So I just want, we did try for that. It's
Why can't you do a fire lane in all grass?
It's very expensive.
Very expensive, but also I think there's something to be said about the way that we can make this a place that's comfortable for drivers, bikers, pedestrians, in a good way, right?
Well, that's the point. Even if cars aren't there, cyclists need, not grass.
I think there are ways that we can slow down traffic. Part of that is the roundabout. Part of it is the urban experience there. It's been done successfully in a lot of other townships and municipalities. It's just drawing on those elements and trying to bring them here. On the scale of ADA accessibility, hard surface.
Right.
oh yeah, good point. Good point, good point.
All right. All right, let's keep going. So we already kind of went through this, but this is a diagram showing the uses on the ground floor. Blue indicates residential space on the ground floor, and the orange indicates kind of a public use. So the bottom orange would be our lobby and amenity space, and the orange at the top by the public parking would be 8,500 square feet of retail. You can see by that public parking and retail, there's actually an underpass under the building that would connect to Wall Street. And so that was another thing we saw as one of the goals of the Uptown framework was this desire for connectivity to the boardwalk system and to the lake. And so by having that cutout there, that's why we got those easement parcels, was to allow us to actually connect onto Wall Street so that there could be kind of a natural flow of pedestrians from Wall Street down to the park and to the lake.
Now, because it's the time it is, scooters and bicycles, does that count under your pedestrian access?
I mean, I would count that as pedestrian access, but there's actually quite a bit of grade change right there, so that might need to be a staircase.
Yeah, we would probably hope to
Might
avoid
help our
that in
case.
that underpass, but
In case you run into any scooters on campus.
Right.
Can you go back one side? Is that the only planned retail dining space?
Well, there's actually one more
On the
tiny
ground
retail
level.
space that we're going to refer to as a newspaper stand, but it's like a pearl in the middle of the oyster. So there's a tiny building right in the middle that could be an ice cream shop or coffee shop or something. So we can show that actually in, I think maybe the next image
Okay,
can kind of
okay.
see. So I'm just going to move my mouse. So you have the Woonor shown kind of in this white paver color. And then this white block would be that public parking component covered. And then you see this white space with the tall windows here. That would all be retail. And so that connects to this underpass that would then bring you up to Wall Street. So that's about 8,500 square feet of retail. You have some kind of apartment use up here, and then our lobby would be on the right. And then in the middle, you have this probably something like 600 square foot newspaper stand type building that could be some kind of outdoor dining experience of some sort, but that's the other retail component. So you have basically, when you come through off of Wall Street, you have retail on both sides of you with some kind of outdoor dining experience. And then on the other side of the Woonor, from the land that we don't control.
Wait, sorry, when you said you come out of Wall Street, you would have retail on both sides?
That's correct, because Wall Street brings you through an underpass that's up here.
Yeah, I see it on the right.
So this
That's retail.
is retail.
Yeah.
And
What's
then
on?
this.
Oh, that out in the middle. Okay, got it. Okay.
In the middle,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then as this park, there's quite a bit of grade change as you go down to the lake. So we were envisioning some kind of cascading terraced lawn that you could program in different ways for different kind of events. And then you can see, we have a play area here kind of close to the retail so you could chill and have your coffee and also watch your kids. And also some sports courts on the other side. So we're really trying to create a central space that can be used as a community gathering space in many
Did you
different
not,
ways.
I thought in one rendering I saw a stage kind of down on that end.
Yeah.
So essentially you have an amphitheater
So we have a,
We're going down there where you could have concerts and everything else.
we have a stage component, which is right here, which we have more clear renderings of.
Right.
And so as we go down, these are just close-ups of everything I just talked about. So this is that retail and exterior dining. And we've shown it as kind of a contemporary take on a traditional style at this point, but we're still working through the actual architectural expression of everything. This is that connection to Wall Street, and we're showing some cool brick pattern in there. You know, we played with the idea of hanging vines, but we were concerned that they wouldn't live. But thinking about the idea of a building as maybe an opportunity for public art or some kind of artistic expression.
Oh, our
could
art center
be
would love that.
nice, yeah.
Absolutely. And this helps because I was picturing
Could you go back? I
bigger
wanna ask
bounds,
a
this is
question.
great.
Sure.
So the area that I call the amphitheater, Andy, is that core land or is that parkland or what is that?
That's core land.
All the way up to that?
Yep.
All the way up to the where?
To the driveway?
Your brick pavers kind of follow Kiwi Trail now, right?
That's
correct.
Your
Right.
white, that concrete.
Yeah, but the
That's
cascading
Kiwi Trail
part
now, so everything left
is
is
not
current
core
Block
land,
6.
is it?
I would say the majority of that probably is in our lease.
What now?
I would say the majority of that green space probably
Oh.
falls within our lease.
I was thinking wrong.
So we could do that.
Like core.
We actually met with Sandy Campbell at the Corps of Engineers to say, is what we're about to show council possible? And she said that she saw that this is possible.
To include like the shoreline, whatever's built, looks like almost a docking area right there on the shoreline, and then the dock itself.
Allie was at the meeting personally. I'll let her tell you.
The dog's already there.
So what they said was the dock is allowed. Their only concern was how do you regulate people not keeping their boats there 24/7?
Yep.
Because it has to remain open to the public. You can't sell spaces, lease spaces, but it is a permissible use. You are not able to portray music over the lake.
We just pointed up the hill.
Yes. Due to it carrying over. So that was their biggest concern.
But I mean, but to the docking and the boat staying over there, would that be something that we would have to monitor or police or whatever the right term is?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
That sounds like 2 or 3
Chief would
people's
like that.
full-time job.
I'm sorry.
So music would have to go in the other direction. We just couldn't make it seem like it's going over the lake.
I believe so. The music can't carry over the lake.
Well, I mean, I get that, but.
I was relieved to hear that that's the part they were concerned about.
Right, me too.
The slips I thought were far more important.
Right. Because I mean, if you put the dock in there, then you open this whole thing up to a broader community, not just, you know.
Not just Clemson.
Boaters coming in and everybody else.
So you enhance your dock, you already have your two boatable slips,
But
so
this-
you
I
can
mean,
figure
this-
that.
But this looks like it's almost a pier going out.
I was gonna
So I'm saying
say,
you have two different ways to tag
Yeah,
it there, so you
fine.
can get a little more.
So-
I do have some concerns about that because that is a code that, it's a code, A. B, are we gonna be in the marina business? Number 3, there's pollution from those boats. I mean, that is a bigger take on, that's taking on a big project if we're gonna become a Clemson Marina.
Now,
We start selling fuel and stuff.
the only question I got though is, you know, I know we got the permit to dredge. So do we not? I thought.
It's almost complete, but when we get it, it'll be good for 5 years.
Right, that's the point. So by the time we get to this thing completed, you would be able to dredge that out again.
Well, ideally, you wait for the next big drought.
Right.
Because they frown upon doing it when there's
Right,
water up for
right.
fishery purposes.
I know
We wouldn't be renting slips or anything like that. These would just be like a parking space for
I understand, but I also said what John said, is that it has the tendency to be abused that way as well, of, hey, this is my personal little space here, I live right over there, I'm gonna just park my boat. We got enough trouble with people parking cars 24/7.
We could police that.
I didn't say, yeah.
But I just want to make certain that beyond everything else, we can develop this section below Kiwi Trail as we see it.
All it takes is a redevelopment plan that we submit to the Corps of Engineers. They would work with us as we developed it, so by the time it got there, it would be approved.
Okay.
I think it might be a good moment to say, this was our idea for how to program the park. I think you alluded to this a little at the beginning, but you know, our goal really is to hear what you want, and we'll work with you to try to make our side of the, you know, the private land work well with what you want.
Well, I mean, to my opinion, this is the best plan we've seen so far as the lakefront usage, so, but, you know, I think we had talked about an amphitheater all along.
Right.
And this gives us that, even though I know about the music.
So skipping to that, you know, we were thinking about how do you take this terrace lawn and really program it so it can be cool. So you can see this image in the top left, that's just a typical day. But in the bottom left, you know, we do have this stage element that's right there in front of the lake. That could be open mic night or some kind of musical performance. That could be a movies in the park type situation. And then we were also thinking about this kind of newspaper stand. Can you program that with, you know, farmers market stalls and really open that up to the public and really make this a community gathering space? So it's been really fun to think about, and I think everyone on our team has really enjoyed this process, just to think about how this space could be used. It's very unique.
I mean, if anybody wants to see what that looks like, go to Knoxville. They've got something very similar to that. In Knoxville, downtown.
Yeah, they have a great downtown.
Right.
And so this is just a view of the other side of the park, just kind of slowly. So you can see, here's that kind of stage element. This is the newspaper stand up here. This would be kind of the main entrance to our kind of residential component to the project. And then we have sports courts down here, and an additional playground, I think, down here. We're also showing, you know, a space for perhaps a canoe rental down here. I think that was something that was specifically shown in the framework plan. And so these kind of some inspirational images that we were thinking about while we planned this out. And so just those play areas, just being kind of interactive and playful in a way. Also, this is a Woonerf that exists in Batavia, Illinois.
Can you pronounce that one more time?
Woonerf.
Woonerf.
W-O-O-N-E-R-F.
Woonerf.
Woonerf.
One of the shorter Dutch words.
Never heard that word before.
Yeah.
Yeah, write that down.
Andy's writing it down.
I think the upper left is actually, if anyone's been to Unity Park in Greenville, give you a good idea for how well, you know, what we're kind of thinking about, how well it can be done. And I think the upper right and upper left kind of play with this idea. When we were approaching it, the idea of like, you know, the built environment as art, right? So you saw that brickwork as in the underpass as trees, right? So we couldn't do, you know, some of the best inventions come from constraints. We couldn't do vines underneath there like we wanted to, so we thought about that. And then we thought it could be cool in the plaza to have some, you know, intricate grass insets, you know, inlets as a design element, as a form of art. And so later you'll be able to see we took a first stab at that. You know, but those are some of the inspiration concepts that we're driving towards, and we think could, you know, create something special.
Just again, to build on that same concept, we have the tree kind of expressed in this brick pattern here. It's just a general kind of inspiration image for how the retail might start to look, and, you know, it's just inspiration at this point. I'll get to the public benefits. So, the result of this, you know, we've identified at least 5 public benefits. That
We started with a dozen at one point. We whittled it down.
Yeah. So we'll be expanding the park. That's pretty obvious. We will be providing some retail at some reduced rate, because we like to take ownership of the placemaking that goes on in our projects, and we think that that's a necessary component to keep this space, you know, active and vibrant. We've created connectivity as shown in the Uptown Next plan. We have kind of positively impacted the traffic and parking situation versus what currently exists. And then we're creating probably a lot of new tax revenue through property taxes. So we can go through each one of these. You want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So I think for the purposes of just showing something of scale that is comparable, we chose Madison, Wisconsin, just because we know it really well. It's in our backyard. We've developed 3 buildings there. And so not to say that we should, you know, that Abernathy Park should become Memorial Union Terrace, but I think that after the expansion, as we have kind of designed our building, and if you think about the C-shaped courtyard as an expansion of the park, the size of the park would be bigger than the Memorial Union Terrace at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is on university
campus, I have cousins that live, I mean, it is not just for students. Family, not families with no kids at University of Wisconsin-Madison go there all the time. So, it's really just a public amenity on the lakefront, and they have the kayak rentals, they have a great restaurant, they have an ice cream shop or someone that sells ice cream, and it's when you talk about people that live in Madison or alumni, they all really think fondly of this, and so I thought that was a helpful comparison, and in terms of help, when we were thinking about if our number one goal is to create a beautiful park, how do we measure that goal? How do we measure success in achieving that goal? And this was our best way to communicate that. And then for the next one,
Memorial Park at Madison, do you know, was that done in stages, sort of kind of what we're trying to consider?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I'd love to
I was trying to
find
remember,
out.
yeah, because I mean, it's dead center, for everybody.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it differently architecturally. I was trying to think if they did it as a city plan or not.
We actually have some connections that I'd love to ask people in the real estate department there. And so for the number 2 benefit in terms of kind of jump starting this park with vibrant retail and programming, we've approached someone who we actually are doing business with right now, who's actually in the audience, who I'd like to have come up for a moment and just say a few words. Tyler Bacino is a young local entrepreneur who we think has done an excellent job at really creating something out of nothing. And so for a restaurant of this size, this was a 50-year-old credit union building that had limited parking and a gravel side yard. And it's located, you can see the train tracks right next to it. So it's off the main road, and there's only 1,000 kids, right? That's not enough to create enough demand to justify this business to be successul. And so in order for this business to be successful, you have to program it. And I think this photo really speaks more than I could ever say to it, but I'll bring Tyler up to say a little bit more and just introduce himself and talk about the project.
Hi, I'm Tyler. Thank you for having me. A little about me, I came to Clemson University as a transfer student in 2017 from Coastal Carolina, but I'm originally from Middletown, Delaware. I graduated in 2020, supposed to be December 2019, but my dad didn't want to come down in the cold, so he said, how about you just wait till May, and then that's when the pandemic hit, so I ended up not walking till November of 2020. But ever since I came to Clemson in 2017, I've been working for TDs of Clemson, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Then I was approached by Mr. Mike, the owner, to take over TDs of the Pier. And so I managed that place for about a year and a half and then moved to Charleston. Well, in December of 2021, TDs of the Pier closed. And with my relationship with Mr. Mike, he called me up and he's like, hey, I closed TDs of the Pier, but I'm just reaching out to see maybe you'd be interested in taking it over and making it your own thing. And it kind of happened literally overnight. I went to Clemson the next weekend. In January of 2022, it was signed over to me, and at the end of March in 2022, we opened Tyler's Pub at the Pier. And in the year and a half we've been opened, in that top right picture is me and my staff winning Best Pizza in Seneca, and for the year of 2022, and hopefully 2023, fingers crossed. And just recently, on August 2nd of this year, we were able to host the America's Best Restaurants Traveling Roadshow. So our episode, I think, might premiere in September. So, I mean, I'll do a little promotion if y'all want to follow us on Facebook or anything. We'll be promoting it then and there. But the big picture is what you can see is what we like to call one of our parking lot parties. So normally we only have that little patio where you can see the red and blue umbrella, which holds about 4 to 6 tables, but during our parking lot parties, we shut down the whole parking lot with caution tape, so no cars can get in, and then we bring a little trailer out there to put a band. And it attracts not only Pier residents, but we cater to residents all over Pickens and Oconee County. At Tyler's, we offer great a great welcoming environment. You know, we pride ourselves on hospitality, and I think given the opportunity, you know, to put something here at the park, we would focus on just that. Yeah. Is that good?
I would just say, everyone I've ever talked to that has been to the Tyler's raves about it, and we're really excited for what he could do at the park, and you know, a world-class park right next door. And I think programming is key. So that's one of the reasons why we're excited to have been working with him already.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, moving forward, more public benefits. So the enhanced connectivity, which we already hit on, we've kind of superimposed our plan onto the Uptown Next plan just to show how closely we're actually adhering to the initial thought of where the connective kind of boardwalks would be that would connect to the larger super block.
But could you go back on this one? So my question, I was going to get you to go back to this one. This is the same thing. So if I'm coming to the park in a vehicle, then really the only way in is going to be to come up to the top of there and pull into that parking lot right there.
You could actually pull in either way. So there's covered parking here that would serve the retail, but it would also just be open to the public. There's also a parking lot here that has about the same number of spaces that currently exist right in the middle. We just kind of move that down.
Right, but again, I'm hoping to more activity. So, but again, so the primary parking for, I guess the one up there right kind of closest to Potbelly Deli, that is for the townhomes. Is that what that was for?
That's for all residents.
Yeah.
All residents.
Right.
Okay, so then another one is the public piece on those.
Right.
Okay.
And my other question, and I know, as you said, this is just your first stab at this, but your Wardorf idea, I would love to see some of that done along College Avenue, because leaving it the 4-lane open as it is not going to, it's not going to slow anything down, is sort of the concern.
Right.
So any ideas that you have on, we've talked about turning it pedestrian and all sorts of other things. It would be really nice to have some ideas as we do that. I'm not asking for, the impossible, but.
Right.
Because John's right, you've got to figure out how to get people in and out of there.
I think one of the next slides that might help answer one of your questions.
This is the parking and traffic kind of impact of our project. So we're showing here 34 spaces for the retail plus 20 spaces for the public, and that would be the surface parking spots. So about 54 spaces total. I think what was there, 19 that exist right there right now? So we are increasing the amount of public parking that's available from either side of Kiwi. And then there's 650 spaces in that deck, which would be for residents. One of the things that we noticed was that all of the goals actually published in the Uptown Next plan we met. Our site would result in fewer curb cuts than currently exist, broader sidewalks, fewer vehicle turning movements on Tiger. We would remove the eyesore properties that are currently kind of along Kiwi Trail there. We would have parking garages that support business, anchor retail, which we just went over, and then students in housing that generate fewer overall trips per day. So all of those we feel like our plan accomplishes, and so we just wanted to point that out because we didn't realize that until later.
If we're successful, I don't think 54 spots is enough.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the areas I wanted to focus on. So, it's very early. For instance, we have a survey for the privately owned land. We don't have a survey for the public owned land at the moment. And so the roundabouts, we're hoping you can park on. Understanding how feasible that really is requires some more physical due diligence on our part. And so at the moment, we were thinking 20 is a comfortable number we know we can hit. We would hope to improve that from a surface parking standpoint, which we think is really a great way to try to drive some of the activity.
Well, like I say, I'm hopeful that from a success perspective that 54 doesn't touch the need.
One other quick question. I assume from those maps that it's wide enough for like the cat buses to come through.
No.
No?
Not on Kiwi. Not down after the roundabout?
I guess I'm just thinking of the cat bus. I'm thinking of the cat bus.
Well, they have to walk out to that, but I mean, because
I was going to say, we
That's
haven't
the
talked about it
question.
yet, but we were thinking that we would try to work to get as close as we can, but potentially just at College and Kiwi.
Okay, yeah, I'm good.
So going back to the parking thing, 54 spaces, I think, agreed. there's a demand in this town for retail and entertainment. This would satisfy that need that people are desperately looking for. I think on a daily basis, you would see more than 54, well, maybe, I think you'd see more than 54 cars. I don't think parking on a roundabout is a great idea. I think that keeping that clear would be awesome to keep traffic flow. So if there's a way to work, I mean, does that mean that that public parking deck is only one level?
No, I think
Or is it just so narrow and then 2 levels?
it's multiple levels. I think that, moving people from 2 stories up down into the park was one of our concerns.
Sure.
I think hearing some of the feedback is helpful, and we can explore how to just resolve that on our, let us get creative. I would suggest, though, that one area that, right now we have 650 parking spaces, which, per the Uptown Next guidance document, is what would be required. That's our max occupancy. And so, in other words, we very well could only have 1,200 students living or residents living with us in any given year. So,
Good correction.
Thank you. And so there's 50 spaces potentially of flex in any given year in our deck. And so to the extent...
Okay, so that resident deck overflow parking, if the public deck is full, what's the idea?
So can we come back with a more thoughtful answer?
Because I think more than 54 spaces is definitely going to be needed.
But I will say this, I mean, based on everything else kind of down that way and everything, your occupancy is going to be right at 100%.
Yeah.
So you can get over that, picking up 6.
That location, just, yeah.
That's not going to happen.
My only desire, well, with the parking and all, but I want to also reiterate about the housing piece, because the plan that you showed with the amphitheater and looking over the lake, as you determine where the type of housing you want to put in, if it's per bed or by the unit, to ensure that we also allow our permanent residents to have a key spot as well.
Right,
So
to have access
not
to
that they're going to, live.
Right.
Not that they're in the background somewhere and that our students are forefront. Not that I don't care about our students, because I do. I understand that. But in essence, this is really for, about the city of Clemson and what's best for the city, but also our residents. And so for me, I think it's going to be important that we make sure that we provide residency or a place for them to live, that they can take advantage of that view, that lake. So when you're thinking about the housing piece, not that, because I saw the apartments, but I wouldn't want that to be all student housing, and then on the backside, hidden somewhere, would be those townhouses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
maybe there's a way to
But I
market
think, I
some.
will say this about the townhomes.
So I just think
if
we need to do that.
begin to
Thanks
see
for
a
interrupting me,
decline in
John.
our student body population, for example, which used to say we don't, that those townhouses could then become more focused on non-student, it'd be families or be whatever the case may be. I mean, I think that's one thing about it, particularly if they're built out appropriately, then you'd have another way to go, for example.
I think that's a great point. I think one of the things we really like about our 2-bedroom unit that has 4 occupants in it is the flexibility of it. And so long-term, 50 years from now, if Clemson were to say, we're going to house 100% of our kids on campus, they have to live on campus.
But I think
There just aren't going to be that many.
But I think it's also, you never know when you reach a point when you're, with the population like it is and everything else, that your student enrollment just naturally comes back down.
Right, and we have a 2-bedroom unit with 4 beds.
Rental.
That's as big as a 2-bedroom condo.
That's
And
what I
so if the market changes, that could be easily converted into a 2-bedroom.
A great conventional use.
Right.
Okay.
Because a lot of student housing is not great conventional housing. And
No, I know that.
that's where I was going with it.
So building on her point, I think clarity, if there's a way, I don't know how the management side of things works, if there's a way to market some that are rented by the unit and some that are rented by the bedroom, that way you are fitting in both.
Right, at diverse locations within the plan. So
Because
that-
we don't mind living by students. We
Well, that
want
goes back to what I said, I still think that those townhouses could draw a comparable in.
Yeah, but they're not getting that view that the apartments are getting.
And I think that's important.
I don't want us to make the paper again for having students getting all lakefront living and the
Exactly.
residents tucked around behind the
Exactly.
corner.
Right. The point of this is to benefit the community as a whole, which includes the students, right? So we have a duty to both.
Agree. All right, I guess the last public benefit is just all the money, all the increased tax base, which is going to probably undoubtedly be large.
And I think, this is a, we listed out all of the areas, so it's not just Clemson City, right, that gets increment. Student housing, ironically, doesn't put a big burden on the local school districts. That's, I think, important. But most importantly, I think, the park, right, this can serve as a catalyst for the uptown, development, right, the development of this world-class park, right, this regional attraction. And so we'd be naive to say that this isn't an important part to talk about.
Have we made them aware of the new impact fees yet?
I think we're painfully aware.
Good response.
She sent it over 2 nights ago. No, I'm just joking. 2 weeks.
Okay, so questions and feedback. So in that, have you envisioned an order for construction? What comes first, what comes second? How does this go?
Do you deliver the whole project?
Right, yeah, do you deliver the whole project? Is there,
It would likely be one delivery, probably a 30-month construction schedule.
Okay.
If I were guessing, it could be slightly less than that.
probably not.
And so that would it would probably be wood over a concrete base. So the retail would all be within a concrete base, and then the residential would be in wood above that, and then the parking structure would be precast.
Which is concrete.
If there was a way to do the park side first, just a thought, the public benefit, the immediate impact of having that terraced park side would be awesome. Get people using it. I don't know if there's a way to do that safely with construction happening right there.
Plus the fact that, see, it's just going to take up the parking that's down there now, you're not going to be able to replace it. Because, see, it takes the parking
There,
now.
I hadn't thought about that.
And so until that's complete, you can't replace it.
Okay, good point.
Effectively, the park almost closes under construction.
Good point.
Outside of probably the boardwalk areas and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I think that,
Can you go to that financial slide? When we were talking about tax increment finance and trying to put that plan together, see that $2.1 million delta? Well, actually ours would be $591,531. That's basically what's going to be available to pay for bonds and things that you finance projects with for the tax increment.
And if y'all are at 400 units, this will immediately spin off 1.2 to 1.7 million dollars in the Parks and Rec portion of that fund. And obviously, this is the most connected park and a use of that. We will have others from Signet and other things happening in town. If the TIF happens and all of those things, we can be talking about what's happening on College Avenue and improvements where we have to have skin in the game. We're gonna have to have skin in the game in the park if we wanna make it as well. So this will be spinning off revenue. That assumes we get the TIF, and there may be some.
That's a big assumption.
And because we've got our assistant city administrator who's done an amazing job at finding money, there might be some other creative things that we can do and take advantage of as well. So, I think it lines up.
Can all those park improvements that we're looking at, like the playground and all that other, that's on us, right? And so the monies you just talked about can be directed.
Yeah, but I mean, lots of that money is coming from this project.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Most of that money will come from this project.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
The money does come there to do that.
Yeah, this spins it off, and this has enough of a delta that I wouldn't want to, during the TIF,
I'm not saying you use the entire amount. I'm just letting, that's the increment I keep talking about.
Right.
That's it.
and there's a lot of good headroom there to get some other things done that will be good benefit. But, I'm really interested in, I'm just trying to imagine like 8,500 square feet, really want more, I really want to see more information about your plans to subsidize the retail and what that's going to look like. Because, I think it's important, again, as we activate this space and we improve the park, that if, that's coming online at the same time as the park is happening, that's important. So, your recruitment strategy for, what's going to happen there to have that completely activated.
I'd love to see a way for you to get him to open a business in there,
So that is our goal. So maybe
Right.
without publishing the details, but we highlight some.
That would be perfect.
8,500 square feet, how big is
So
this?
that is just one, right? More people
Well, that's all
like
the
him.
the Bixby's got about that right now.
Yeah.
That's this
So-
building, top and bottom.
This building, top and bottom, is 8,500 square feet, right?
The whole, the building.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical, we're trying to sell this as a destination, and we have sold it to the public as that. And so it's critical that when the building opens, the retail space is full too.
If y'all get a chance, if you haven't been over there yet at Unity Park, like something like the Commons, Tom, the Commons at Unity Park, I think would be a really, really good concept for something there that would be a major draw to get people there that has a couple, options, flow into outside would be a great concept.
I think it's also worth, Joe,
Because the microphone, they won't pick you up.
so I think I'm with Carr. I got in a little late, but working on the Peter project. But I think it's also worth noting to everybody's point here about the amount of retail space, right? And that activation. You've got immense amount of outdoor area that's going to be fully programmed too. So even if you're operating your business out of, let's just say, 2,000 square foot, right? You've got this massive amount of outdoor patio space. Your weather here is perfect for it. So it's going to feel a lot larger. I think it's also worth talking a bit about our lobby and what we do, like in some of our businesses that we do, coffee shop, for example, because it's going to expand that 8,500 square feet and make that a little larger too, potentially. We're not saying we're going to do that. I'm saying talking about that program. So, yeah.
Just keep throwing out promises, man.
Here's what I want out of that. I want to hear more than coffee shop, beer, pizza, and wings. I want to hear more than that. We got
Sit down dining.
I want,
would be awesome.
if we're, I'll quote John here, a destination, you want a nice restaurant. You want.
It's like beer and pizza battle night.
Yeah, everything.
But if you look at a place like the Pier, it gives you multiple options, like golden brown and delicious and that kind of thing, and then the seating common and those kind of places is something that's missing. And I mean, we have opportunities, and yes, everybody wants a replacement for something along Blue Heron and that kind of thing, but
No buts, yes.
Again, I think we're also developing in a different way in Clemson, where we have nodes we've got our downtown that's been there. We've got Patrick Square developing. We've got Packlet Milliken coming. So we have nodes of downtown and opportunities that provide choices and opportunities for different people and what you want and what you feel like that day. Do I want to go down and mix it up, at Charleston Sports Pub, or do I want to go out to Rick Irwin's, or do I want to go somewhere else? So I think there's some opportunity there in the way that our commercial nodes are developing in Clemson that, I think this can be a good in-between spot for, given the outdoor, lakefront, nature of it.
And you add in what's happened down what we call Uptown now, with coming at the Bixby, walk-on's been successful. We'd like to think the Signet crowd brings in a restaurant, you bring something over there. So now that little grouping down there turns into be another overall destination that's different than downtown, as Bob was just describing.
I do. My other, again, with that parking on the north side, the public parking there, and that traffic circle, that's going to be problematic because that's a really hard spot to get to. So that north end traffic circle, that's making a left in there. You can't make a left. It's right in, right out. And if that's the only access to that public parking, that's not workable, whether it's 54 spaces or 1,000 spaces for the public there. That's going to be a really, really hard thing to happen. So if
go down Wall Street right there.
there's a way to connect it into Wall Street.
Wall Street right there, just connect into Wall Street.
You already show it kind of coming in.
Or,
Come over there.
now this is a redesign for you, or if some of that public parking deck happens on the south end, and maybe some of the townhouse units that then have a little better view of the lake, as some people have said, end up on that north side where you have a parking deck. I don't know. But again, it's going to be really public parking on that north end, unless there's another access that, again, making a left-hand turn into that, going west.
Right, almost impossible.
Really bad. Making a left-hand turn out of there, totally impossible. And so I think how that public parking, where it is and how you access it is really, really important.
That's a good
And
comment.
access off College is gonna be your most practical way to make that occur.
Yeah, I mean, on just Wall Street, as you kind of got it drawn out, it seems to me you could make it work on that direction.
Yeah, or, you know, I know you still have access issues. In some ways, it makes more sense for, you know, people that are living there that might not, that we hope are not in their cars often, if that north end becomes some of the parking for the units, and have the public parking in where it's easier, where you're definitely coming in off Wall Street and off College, because again, that's going to be, again, almost unusable unless you're willing to drive around campus, by the SO, go out that way, come make a right into Kiwi Trail, left in there, come out and do your thing. It's just, yeah, not a great spot there. So if you can put some thought into how that could
Absolutely.
at least rearrange the inventory, something like that, or how you do it.
And we don't have a traffic engineer engaged yet. That's our next step as we kind of get into the more formal process here of submitting.
Yeah, but as your next step when you move on, if you can just have those things, start thinking about those things conceptually or a little bit further down the road, that would be great. And but the other piece, I really like what you do to the park. I do not share the same concerns. You know, again, even though we have a pretty affluent student body, I mean, not all of them own boats. So, you know, I don't think we're going to have a huge problem there. And that's a relatively easy problem to patrol. Because guess what? Our police
Already doing 12 months.
are already doing 12 of them. But this is going to be a spot at night when the overnight guys, this is going to be one of their hides when they go and they're doing, you know, sitting there filling out a report. This would be where I would go, you know, if I'm out there filling out, you know, doing my work and I'm parked for a little bit. This will be one of their spots. So there'll be eyes on this throughout the day, and you know, those we can address this issue. This is a total, like 100% minuscule detail right now. Your canoe rental and that kind of stuff should not be inside that dock where people are coming around in boats. We should separate that use out a little bit. You know, if going out in a paddleboard with boats coming in there, it's going to be great. So I think somewhere.
Which was hence my concern, but that's okay. You blew off my concern, but that's okay. That's exactly where I was on that, but that's fine.
So yeah, just like separating those two uses out a little bit, even if it's just on the right side and the outside of that would be better there.
And are you all looking at doing, because you mentioned the courts, did you have a concept of what you would put out there? Is that something we would do as a city for the park? The different courts that you said something about
There are sports courts shown there. I think we have a volleyball court shown, but I think that's more just a concept. We would have to work with you guys to
that's what I was
understand.
And I mean, ultimately, we're going to design the park the way that we want to design the park. We will appreciate ideas and concepts, and I think y'all have got some great concepts here, but ultimately, that's our call. It's going to be
Site Design Group was our landscape architect on this, and they are nationally renowned. They do a great job. They did the pier, the renovation of the pier, and some really high-profile projects in Chicago, like Chicago Tribune Tower and the Michigan Avenue expansion. But we're going to work with them on the private side of the land, and we would highly encourage at least an intro.
Other questions, comments?
I think there's been a lot of good feedback. I mean, Robert and I probably had a little more information
That's where you're hearing us a little
because
quieter because we could.
Yeah, I mean, you know, several months ago when council asked us to kind of vet the different groups with staff to look through it, so we kind of worked with the guys. What I will say, with the great comments tonight, they've been responsive to every feedback we have. So I'm looking forward to the next step now that you've gotten a little more robust engagement and some different.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, the changes you've already made from the first initial, we do appreciate that.
Looks good.
So we do greatly appreciate it. You've always been agreeable to work with us.
The dense housing part, dense, how tall was that planned to be as it is today?
So the main building will be 7 stories, the residential building that you're looking at from the north. We will have some step backs to try to provide relief.
That's what I was thinking, that green.
Yeah, specifically the retail you're seeing right now. So our primary focus was the pedestrian experience, and that step back at that first and second level is imperative for
But housing 7 stories.
honoring that. And so,
Well, 5 stories of housing over the 2 that you see there, so a
Yeah.
total of 7.
and so when you're in it, right, in the courtyard and you're dining on Tyler's at the park, if you're looking for it, you're going to see the residential building. But the idea is that you're really experiencing the 2 stories, and you're putting the money into the design of those 2 stories. You're doing a lot of glass, a lot of really good brickwork, right?
Yeah.
Mature landscape. I mean, like, I think about like downtown Greenville. A lot of times when you're walking down
Yeah,
downtown
that-
Greenville,
downtown
you don't
Greenville.
realize you're walking underneath a 10 or 12-story building
Certain height.
based on the landscape and the on-the-ground experience and those kind of things. Now, it'll take it a little while to get there with what happens, but with good design, you can
That's right.
mitigate some of that. And I'd be a little interested to see a little bit of the massing from College Avenue as well with that drop off, like what it's, obviously.
Yes.
We're talking about a maximum of 7 stories. So as that drops off, it's 7 stories along Kiwi Trail, but from College, it would be shorter.
And then one area that we are still working through is the parking deck, especially as we reorganize this stuff. But I would suggest that parking stories are much different than residential stories.
Sure, right.
Because of height, yeah, it's much more condensed. So 7 stories for the residential component.
Okay, all right. I just didn't think of that until now because your renderings are so beautifully faded out on the top level. That makes me pause, but that's okay.
So I think the
I mean, it's
lower
not,
right
you know.
photo on the screen is probably one of the better ones, right, to provide you that massing shot.
I mean, that will be the biggest structure on the lake, right? So that's what I'm thinking is that is towering. I don't hate everything you've given us. You've gotten my feedback. I just think that is huge.
That's one of the reasons we didn't present anything specific there, because we're still
Why
working
it's
out
grayed
how do we
out.
mitigate that through step backs, because we
You gotta
do
remember
agree.
it's off the lake adjacent to business initially.
I know, I'm just,
And then you got the step back at the second.
yeah,
floor.
but that's not what residents are gonna see, and that's,
Well, I'd like to think the residents see the value of the park and everything else over that.
And
I hope so, I hope so.
I think they will.
I would offer that good architecture is a mitigant.
I do agree about that. I hope that the residents see the benefit of the other stuff. I don't know that that's gonna be the point. Short term, long term, they will.
I mean,
Be prepared.
When you hit me down there, this is a long term.
This is a long-term plan, right? I mean, you're making a destination for Clemson. I think immediately people will see this and panic until they use it, right? That's where my mind is.
Without putting too much on our architect, I hope that the architecture really wows
A
out.
lot of pressure on the architect.
Not a problem.
Well, the only thing I'm gonna say, Lillian, it makes this whole area a lot more usable.
I don't disagree with any
I mean,
of that.
I'm gonna factor in the lake. I think the value we're gonna add to the lake. And
I'm not negating any of that.
And also, I think the amphitheater brings in the retail piece and then what he was talking about. I mean, I think all of that brings so much more value. And then-
I agree completely about that.
And remember your context of College in 123. This is built to integrate into future phasing, whether these guys or someone else. So that whole dynamic of what you're looking at off of those streets is going to change eventually too. So it will kind of create that fade down to the business, to the traffic corridors as well as the fade.
I think it helps that it won't look like 7 stories from, you know. But I just know that will be
Conversation.
a very strong conversation.
And to Lillian's point, it's still going to be a point of contention.
Absolutely.
But
As
there,
we know, in terms of the tall, the high rises, regardless of how we look at it. So we have to be realistic in that too.
My job is just to tell you what I know my neighbors are going to tell me.
okay.
So,
But I think there are things we can do. I mean, Nathan and I, we saw some things talking about the comp plan of actually creating those 3D models of what it's going to look like. I thought that was really helpful for the comp plan discussion.
Yeah, I think these guys have that capability as well, so I'm thinking.
Maybe we need to, I mean, I'm talking about putting it up as a model.
But when you do that, make certain that you demonstrate everything that's there, that's real. So, you know, I mean, you got these drawings, and if you do it in a 3D perspective, but then also show Papa John's and show Circle K and show the post office and all those buildings, so you have what that looks like as you look towards that. I still think, though, in time, you're going to have what I've used the term on Knox is that fadeaway look.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe even with those buildings there now, it's going to have this, coming off of college, it's going to have this look like that. It's just not going to be gigantic and nothing there. No, if you had nothing on the ground on college and it was just flat land, it would completely look different. But right, you don't have nothing there. And that's why when you do the 3D rendering, you need to do it as a surround of the whole area. So show it off of 123 so you can see how that kind of looks too. Because I think that would mitigate a lot of your concerns.
Yeah, yep.
Other comments, feedback, questions for us?
I think your feedback's been very clear, so we appreciate that. We have some stuff to do, but we appreciate the clarity.
I think in time we'd love to host anyone who'd want to join us at the pier just to see what we mean when we put a lot of our effort into design. I think you'd be really impressed by the product that we've built there, especially in comparison to some other student housing product, which is more just middle of the fairway. We really do go over and beyond.
On your website, I think I've looked at it before, that there's a list of where you have properties.
Yes. Okay. It would be happy to connect you with.
I think it's on there. I was trying to remember what I'd seen.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
If somebody has something else, we're adjourned. Have a great evening.